Okay, in the last segment here, I'm just going to go over some science behind saltwater tanks so that you kind of understand why you're doing the things you're doing and why not to do other things. So, water chemistry, as it's been said, we're not keeping fish and we're not keeping coral, we're keeping water. The hobby's about keeping water and keeping the water parameters stable. There are a few different parameters that you think of when you think of water quality. So you think of temperature, you may think of pH, and those are fine. I don't bother to really test for either of them because the pH kind of handles itself. At least I've never had a problem with it. And the temperature is all hooked up with redundant controllers. The things that are more important when you have coral in particular are your calcium, which is this one here, and again your alkalinity, which is this one here. They do make a liquid one as well, but then you'd have to add 2 different liquids every time you do it, and they fight with each other in the water. The reason that calcium and alkalinity are important is because they are pulled out of solution by the stony corals, and they create calcium carbonate, and that's what they build their skeleton out of. They're essentially 3D printing their skeleton, pulling elements out of the water. As they do that, the quantities of those elements obviously decrease. In the ocean, that doesn't matter because it's a giant body of water and the coral could never use up all the stuff in there anyway, and as it dies off and degrades from rainfall and whatnot, it's releasing those things back into the water, so it's a self-balancing system. We don't have that luxury, so we have to replenish those elements on our own. Part of the problem with that is when you put those things in solution, they want to interact with each other and create calcium carbonate, which is going to fall out of solution as a white powdery sand. Well, that's a problem because that means the coral can't take it up. So how do you manage that? How is it not just automatically happening and all falling out of solution? The answer is that there's magnesium in the water, and the magnesium basically causes those two to not want to interact as strongly. Still, if you dump a bunch of this stuff in there, your calcium levels would plummet. And if you were adding liquid calcium and dumping a ton of it in there, your alkalinity would plummet. With this one, you have less impact on alkalinity falling because, again, it only dissolves as it's depleted, so not as concerned about that one. Although if you do look in that filter where I was showing to put those cubes in, you'll see there's a fine layer of like sediment or white silt in there, and that is calcium carbonate powder that's been falling out of solution for the past several months. Not going to hurt anything. It's happening on a small scale. But yeah, if you put in too much of one over the other, you're going to throw things all out of whack. The corals will be angry very quickly. Usually within a day or two, you'll know you did something very wrong, and in some cases, they die. Not too worried about it if you follow the directions I gave you. I could show you how to do water testing on it. I don't think it's going to be necessary in the time frame I'm gone. If you are interested in it, maybe I'll make a video on that. The next thing then is nutrients. And nutrients are part of water quality. There are several nutrients to consider. So the nitrogen cycle, which you know, you have your own tank, even though it's fresh water, it's the same cycle. The fish poop, the corals poop, if they're being fed. They create ammonia. The ammonia is eaten up by bacteria, which grows on all of the rocks. So that's one difference in saltwater over freshwater, is you have a lot more filtration going on in the tank than you do in the filter itself, although there is biomedia in there as well. Ammonia is converted to nitrate, which is less toxic, and then that is converted to nitrite, and then into nitrate. Nitrate is not pulled out of the water by anything but algae, and unfortunately, the algae that grows in the tank grows very quick and is ugly, so that's why we have the refugium on the back, so that we can grow bigger macroalgae and try to outcompete the nasty hair algae. The other thing that grows algae even faster is phosphate, and phosphate comes from fish waste, coral waste, but also food. Whether it's eaten or uneaten, adding food to the system is how phosphate gets in there. In nature, there's other ways it can enter a system, but in an artificial system, phosphate enters through food. Overfeeding, so if you were to put in like 4 pinches of that instead of 1, and you did it every day instead of every other day, you're putting in a lot of food. Everything in there that eats and has a mouth is probably going to be happier, but then the algae is going to grow out of control. The stony corals will lose all of their color, they will lose polyp extension, and they will bleach out and get nasty really quick. Once that happens, a lot of times they do not recover. And you'll see some in here, like that spiky guy there or that great big one there, are actually just dead skeletons, because I'm still new at this, and small polyp stonies are very difficult. Large polyp stonies like this guy here, or any of the Euphelia that have the waving tentacles, those guys are a lot more tolerant, I've found. They don't bleach out. They will retract and shrink up a bit, and you can tell they're uncomfortable. Phosphate can be dealt with by a water change or active systems like the refugium, or I've got some granular ferric oxide or GFO in a bag inside that filter that helps to lock it up and pull it out of solution as well. As long as you don't overfeed, you shouldn't have to deal with it. The light on the refugium I didn't mention, but that is on a timer, so you don't have to worry about that. It'll come on during the day and off at night. Everything should be under control. Shouldn't be any emergencies with it. The other thing that phosphate does is grows algae like Miracle-Gro. So if you were to pour Miracle-Gro in this tank, it would be the same effect as having a huge phosphate spike. Phosphate is supposed to be kept at 0.001 to 0.003 parts per million. Nitrate somewhere between, I think they say 8 and 20. Usually keep it pretty low if I can at all help it. Again, we don't need to test for those things as long as we're taking care of it the right way. I'll do a water change before I leave, and I'll do one when I get back, and that should tamp all that down. Those are the parameters that really matter. There are obviously other things that we could test for, like our magnesium, although there's not a whole lot of coral in here that pulls magnesium out of solution in large quantity, so water changes handle that. We could also test for things like iodine. I don't worry about that because we're handling it with water changes. There's a lot of different nutrients that could be added in individually, but again, it's a small system. Nothing in there is out of control, so water changes typically handle it. I think that about wraps it up. If you want any other topics covered, I can make more videos, and I will show these to you before I leave town. So let me know what you think. I hope you found this educational, and thank you very much.